All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We're really looking forward to our very first Lunch and Learn. I am not going to waste any more of our time. I'm going to turn it right over to my colleagues, Megan and Crystal, who are going to walk us through their presentation on serving diverse learners. I want to give them a huge shout out for doing this, for being our first Lunch and Learn partners. We really appreciate your time. And yeah, just looking forward to a great conversation today. I'll kick it over to you guys.
Hi, I'll just introduce myself while I am working on sharing my screen. My name is Megan Gregory, and I am the program manager for the CES, which is the Communication and Education Support Programs, and the ELS programs, which is our Early Learner Support Program. Can you guys see the PowerPoint? And
Yeah,
that's all
looks
you
great.
see?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And good afternoon. My name is Crystal Millington. I am the program manager for our BES, which is our Behavior and Education Support Classrooms, and our SLS classrooms, which is Specific Learning Supports Classrooms. So happy to be here and just excited to share with you all the information we have about neurodiverse learners and how their behavior may show up in classroom settings or just in various places, just period. So we're happy to do this presentation. Just so you know, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We will do our best to answer them. And then we will also have time after to answer questions as well. So as things come up, just drop them in the chat and then we'll get to them and we'll have some dialogue. So we'll go ahead and get started. And the first slide is a reflection slide. And it is a quote that says, "In my world, there are no bad kids, just impressionable, conflicted young people wrestling with emotions and impulses, trying to communicate their feelings and needs the only way they know how." If you could drop in the chat what resonates with you from this slide, that would be wonderful. I will share a little bit about why I thought this was an important slide. Um, because behavior is a form of communication, and when you don't have any direction or any way or have learned any way to deal with certain things, you're going to respond the only way you know how. And that could look like a multitude of different things. And sometimes we see it as disrespectful, disruptive, but for them, it's just the only way that they know how. So I just wanted to share that. And if you could also come off mute if you would like to, just give a few moments of reflection time and what stands out to you about this quote. Exactly. Thank you so much for sharing. Awesome. Thank you. So thank you, Tatiana and Janice, for sharing. I hope I said you guys' names correctly. Thank you, Abigail. So overall, we're just not putting kids in a box. And so in order for us to have this conversation today, we are going to frame and get an understanding of what we're talking about when we talk about behavior. So next slide, please. So when we're understanding behavior, it's been broken down into two parts. So students with mild and severe disabilities may exhibit certain behaviors in various environments. These behaviors may not look the same for each child and may look differently depending on the environment they are in. This is important to highlight because sometimes, let's say, for instance, when a child is at school, they behave abnormal than how they would behave at home. And we have to consider what are some of those implications that are causing that behavior. So if at school, maybe there's a lot more structure, a lot more demand, a lot more learning that is happening at home, maybe not so much. They get to do more of their preferred things. So there could be a disconnect on why these behaviors may happen. And then the next part of it is identifying what the behaviors are And having an effective intervention plan in place will help reduce the frequencies of the behavioral infractions, and give the student the tools needed to regulate their own behavior. So back to the quote, when it was talking about how the students will respond the only way they know how, it is our job to be the guidance of how we can shape that. How do we provide them with the tools they need to engage or to regulate themselves? Because that's the ultimate goal. Everyone is not built to just automatically know what to do, or know that if someone steps on your foot that you should not try to fight that person. How do you respond? Like, how do we keep it from going from 0 to 100, maybe 0 to 10? And being able to understand that student's ability or that child's ability to recognize that, talk about that, give them language, give them the tools, and then hopefully we'll build capacity to learn how to regulate our emotions. So when we're also understanding behavior, all behavior serves a purpose. And this slide here is our seat slide. So take a seat and let's evaluate what we are seeing from the student. Is it sensory? Is it escape avoidance? Is it attention seeking? Is it tangible? The reason why it's important, because behavior, um, it changes based on our responses. So, for instance, if we're talking about sensory, this is behavior that is internally pleasing. Some of us do this every single day. We might rub our hands together just because it feels nice. We might rock back and forth. We may hum something that is going to just please you, but it may annoy other folks. And what that could look like is someone saying, stop rubbing your hands together, stop rocking back and forth. And what that then causes is for the student to have a reaction, or the person to have a reaction, when all it was is they were doing something internally pleasing and weren't giving, they weren't trying to be disruptive or disrespectful. It just felt good to them. And it's important to note that. Then when we get to the escape avoidance, this is trying to get out of doing something. Sometimes we do this as adults. You don't want to go into work. Oh, maybe I'll just, stay home today and just make, I'm sick. I don't feel good. I'm not going to go. You're escaping that. You're escaping whatever that task may be. There may be some meeting that you don't want to attend. You don't want to ride through traffic. For instance, I came into central office today and they have the entire road blocked off. I really wanted to escape. I wanted to go back home, but I made a detour and got into the parking lot. But these are the types of things that can cause for us to behave a certain way. I could have easily hit my steering wheel, got out my car, started yelling at the construction workers, and then you may have seen me on the news. But just would not have gotten but I have tools. I have learned how to handle situations and how to divert. But everyone does not have that skill. So we need to be able to know if that is what is happening. The next one is attention seeking. Attention seeking also can be very annoying, especially for kids who maybe come from large families and they're the youngest. So as soon as they are coming into the building, they're like, hey, look at me, look at my outfit. Don't I look nice? Or they want to talk to you, or they just want to constantly do anything to avoid a task. So they could be pleasant, or they can constantly yell out. They just want all the attention on them. And that could be annoying. And that could cause for responses to be shut down responses, when what we want to do is reshape how we are, how that student is getting attention. So what can we do instead? And that's how we want to kind of look at all of these. The last one is tangible. I'm not going to do it unless you give me something. So I'm not going to do this work unless you buy me some food. I'm not going to do this unless you give me extra time in recess. So it's really about give and take. And again, once we know what the behavior is serving for us, we want to be sure that what is serving for the student or for anyone, we want to be sure that our responses match. And so when we are presented with one of these seats that we have to take to identify what's happening. Then we need to come up with the proper responses. Okay, next slide. So DCPS recognizes, I think, about 13 disabilities. I have provided some here, and each disability, you may see different types of behaviors based on those disabilities. And it's important to note this because this is called a manifestation. So these behaviors are likely to happen. It's not because I'm doing it on purpose. It's not because I'm just a bad person. This is just how my disability may show up. So the first one is other health impairment slash ADHD. Um, it's not the same. Those are two separate things. So OHI is something that we don't know the cause. So this would be other health impairment and ADHD. So that's attention deficit hyperactive disorder. So this is where we have students who are um, just unable to control themselves, and meaning they might fidget a lot. They may talk a lot. They may have to stand and pace a lot. Their body just has so much energy and it just wants to release itself. So some of those behaviors may come across as um, not no engagement, not able to follow directions because they don't hear it because everything is whizzing past, like everything is happening. I'm super stimulated by everything. So you could be talking to this individual and they could be focused on something completely different, not because they don't want to listen to you, just because that's their brain and how it's functioning at the time. The next one is emotional disturbance. This one is difficult because it is an umbrella term, meaning there are several things that fall under emotional disturbance. So these are students who may, or people who may have mood disorder, may have bipolar, may have schizophrenia, may have depression. So it is a lot of emotional dysregulation. So this isn't just someone who gets mad and hits the table. This is someone who gets mad, hits the table, and starts crying uncontrollably, or their behaviors just don't match the environment that's happening. Um, this is also someone who is completely depressed, completely shut down, doesn't say anything at all, and it's hard to reach them. These individuals also have difficulty with making relationships and genuine relationships. At that, there's a lot of trust. So these behaviors can show up as that more challenging. So there's just people use terms aggressive, argumentative, but that's not really what's happening. What's really happening is just an inability to regulate their emotions and how they are processing what's happening to them. And it just looks different outward because they don't have the ability to regulate. Specific learning disorder, these are students or people who may have issues with a particular type of learning. So it may affect math, it may affect reading, but it's something that um, they are not able to organize in their mind. So it's not clear. They need a lot of support with organization and executive functioning. So that part of their brain that allows for you to think and process, it's not functioning in a way that allows them to access academics. And so you may see frustration, anxiety, inability to focus, and again, the withdrawn piece. Intellectual disability, these are our students who have cognitive delays. They are affected, their brain is affected. There's some trauma or there's just some deficit in the brain, and they have difficulty retaining information, maybe engaging. Um, but their behaviors can show up like a lot of different things. They can just be mimicking something that they learned, but there's no connection for them. So they may just hit someone just because, but they don't know why, or someone told them to. It's a very interesting disability, but it really comes down to how can they be supported and how can they learn how to engage in a way that makes sense for them. And it takes a lot of work, but we really work on trying to build those skills. Hearing impairment. So these are students some of our students or persons don't know that they have a hearing impairment and don't have the necessary tools. So what happens is they come across as irritable, they have mood swings. And this is also true for vision impairment too, because there are some students who just need glasses. And then once they have their glasses, they're able to access, it's like a whole new world is opened up. Same thing with the hearing impairment piece. And then we have autism. Megan is going to go into that a little bit more. These students or persons may have difficulty understanding, follow directions, and their behaviors also show up in a lot of different ways. But a lot of it, depending on how far they are on the spectrum, comes along with communication and just how they engage in their settings. Sensory is a thing for them. But again, Megan will go into that deeper, but this is just a high level overview of the disabilities that we have and how behavior shows up. Right. So how can you respond to some of those behaviors? Again, a lot of this is going to overlap, but we talked about with OHI, ADHD, what they could present is not following directions, work avoidance. And what we could do is teach self-regulation, coping strategies, and this will have to be consistent. The one thing about ADHD in particular is that it does not happen in one full sweep. Like it's not something you could do today and not do it tomorrow. And actually, it's not something you could do in the morning and not do it 5 minutes later. So it has to be consistent, repetitious. For emotional disturbance, some things we could do is just allow the students to learn how to express their needs. What are you feeling? What is going on? Teach self-regulation, giving them coping strategies as well. And then we have SLD, just encourage them to engage in the work, give them reminders, also schedules. That's very helpful for students with SLD. It really helps them to organize their day and track where they are. Right. Intellectual disability, you want to give frequent prompting, reminders, encouragement, praise. Hearing impairment, you want to know what do they need? Do they need hearing aids? Do they need assistive technology? Make eye contact, just being verbal, body language, all those things could be very helpful. And then with autism, verbal cues, chunking directions into small steps, giving multisensory strategies. And then ultimately, there is something that is being communicated to you. So behavior, like I said, is communication. And I put some very specific instances that have actually happened. And I came up with what is trying to be said to you. So one of them is a student that spits on you. And though it's very uncomfortable for many, what could be being communicated at that time is I just don't want you in my space. So ultimately, once we get to that part, we want to be able to give them a different way of expressing themselves versus spitting on you. The next one, if a student is running out of the building, I don't feel safe. So what are you running from? What is causing you to not want to be in this space? And how can we make you feel safe? And then I had a student crawl into the crawl space of the ceiling, and this was about feeling comfortable. And although that might be odd, some students hide in corners, crawl under desks, but there's something about that closed space that makes them feel comfortable, that helps them to get away from what is going on. So ultimately, when we're thinking about behavior, we want to kind of find out what it is that is the root cause and deal with that, and not necessarily what the outward cause is. And now I'm going to turn it over to Megan.
Okay. So what I'm gonna focus on is I'm gonna turn my camera off because I'm gonna be looking at the other screen and it's gonna look kind of weird if I don't. So I'm gonna be talking about specifically autism. So the CES programs, I'm not sure how many of the schools that you guys are in have a CES program, but it's basically our program for students with autism. But we are seeing so many students with autism that they're showing up kind of everywhere. So Crystal has them in her programs, they're in the CES programs, they're in the ILS programs, they're in general education. So I'm going to just talk specifically about what autism looks like, and then also some strategies that you can use. Most of it is sort of focused on the classroom, but all of it can be stuff that could be brought into the space for after school programs. So autism spectrum disorders is a triad of features, and regardless of their functioning level. So the three pieces are the social differences, repetitive behaviors and or obsessive interests, and communication differences. So the social differences you'll see as a lack of social reciprocity. So students that aren't able to read other people's social cues, they can't understand theory of mind, so they can't understand that something different is happening in someone else's brain than is theirs. They can't, it's really hard to take perspectives. Repetitive behaviors, and this might be something that you see. I think one of the big ones are like rocking back and forth or hand flapping, but they can be all kinds of things. We have students that actually engage in repetitive self-injurious behavior. They usually show up having some resistance to changes in environments and routines, and may have unusual responses to sensory stimuli. So, for example, if they're in a room and it's really loud, they may cover their ears and scream really loudly. They have different communication. So the next slide is going to show that autism is a huge spectrum. So it's from kids who can talk to you and you wouldn't, probably you're going to know that there's something a little bit different with them, but their language is intact. They have a huge vocabulary, but they might be super focused on dinosaurs. Or our older kids, we have a couple that are like really focused on modes of communication and have like memorized metro maps and things like that. And so they have amazing communication, but all they want to talk about is the metro. So no matter what you say, they're like, oh, okay, totally ignoring what you say and just rerouting it to their own thing that they want to talk about. So I think I took it out, but there's a quote that says that, if you've met one student with autism, you've met one student with autism. It really has, and I think I'm seeing it even more now, that the students are really on a very, very large range. And the level of functioning can be very impacted, and they also have like sort of a scatter of skills. So they could have really intact language, but really struggle with social interactions. They might also have severe cognitive impairments, which then sort of affects everything. But you'll see that there, along with like severe cognitive deficits, there's also that other piece of the social interaction and the repetitive behaviors and stereotypy and things like that. So the one thing, and I think this works for all kids and not necessarily just students with autism, but one way to look at it is to think that the students can't and not won't. So when dealing with students that are exhibiting challenging behaviors, it's not viewing it as willful. So it's not planned, malicious, and deliberate misconduct. But what it could be is a lack of motivation, negative experience, or awareness of limitations being the primary reason for non-compliance. So it's not actually the student being defiant. It's that they don't have the skills to access whatever it is that that they're trying to do in a more appropriate way. So the things that Crystal was saying, students that want to get out of doing something but don't have the ability to say to you, I don't want to do this anymore, could punch you in the face, spit at you, all of those sorts of things that Crystal was talking about. So these are just some things to sort of keep in mind. So kids that look like they won't do something, and actually it might be that they can't. So kids that are oppositional or stubborn might actually be struggling with cognitive inflexibility. And they might be sort of shutting down and being stubborn because they're trying to avoid being overwhelmed. Students that can do it if they want to. So you've seen somebody do something 100 times and this day they're just not doing it. It might not be that they don't want to do it that day. It might be that they're having some sort of difficulty shifting, they're having a bad day, that sort of thing. So some other ones, I won't read through all of them, but prefers to be alone. Those are kids that sometimes just don't have the ability to interact. And I'm not sure as far as like the kiddos that come to aftercare, some of our students that are, I think, the most severely impaired, they're not even aware that they're being isolating. So I just always think of it as that they're in their own world. Like the outside world is happening around them, but they're just sort of focused on something that they're doing themselves, and they're just not really taking in what's going on around them. So I'm going to go through some instructional practices that can be used, and I think these are all things that can be used in after school. But I think probably the first point of contact, I would say, for any of the kiddos that are coming from one of our programs is to reach out to their teachers, because they're the ones that are working with them during the day and have found the things that work. So the main thing I'm going to go over is sort of the visual supports that you can put in place. Timers are a huge help. We have all different kinds of timers in our classrooms. I'll show you some of the pictures, I think, later, but audible timers. I don't know if you guys have ever seen those time timers where it's like as the time is going, the red gets smaller and smaller. And so they have like a visual of how fast it's going. There's ones that are like, the sand timers, or ones that turn green, yellow, and red. The other piece that's going to be huge is consistency and schedules. So having predictable schedules for when the students come into the aftercare can be really helpful. So if they have a set routine every single day, that'll make things a little bit easier for them. Physical space would be another. So for some students, being in one large room with all of the children together might be too overwhelming. So you might want to set up a space that's, sort of to the side and a little bit smaller, that could have like some sort of divider that would make it just sort of feel smaller for them. So there's a lot of things you can do with just your physical environment. I think another one is students who are runners. I'm not sure what the regulations would be like in the after school, but we do have some like safety lock devices on doors in our classrooms that we use, that adults can just get in and out, but they have like a little feature that makes it so that especially our young kids can't just open doors and run out, because we do have a lot of students this year that are really enjoying running out of the classroom, which can be, a pretty large safety hazard. Okay, so after you have the physical space set up and you have a schedule established, something that can be super, super helpful is having visual support. So even students without disabilities, if they are having a hard time, it might be harder for them to access some of their like coping strategies or their memory, all of that stuff. So visuals really can help all of the kids. Um, but it's super, super helpful for our kids with disabilities, especially when they have language that's impaired, providing pictures so that they have more of an understanding of what's going on. Um, so these would be things that they might have in the classroom that you might be able to just work with their teacher to be able to bring down to the after school space. So this is a picture of a visual schedule that's in a classroom, and um, they start from the top. In this classroom, they actually take the little picture of whatever it is, and then it actually matches to an area in the classroom. Um, and then they bring a little token back to say finished. I think probably you would just do something a little bit more basic where when it's done, you would just put it in that little folder afterwards, and then you would go over with them. Okay, we finished snack. Now it's time for outside, or now it's time for going to your classroom, or now it's time for, I don't know, what else? Art projects. um, and then this is another example of a visual schedule that's individualized. And this one has just like a fun video because as they finish it, it just has a little thing that they fold over so that it's like, oh, okay, we ate our snack, it's finished, we went to our desk. So this would be something, if they had it in their classroom during the day, that you would just ask the teacher if you could, either they could help make one for the kid in after school, or maybe it would be one that would even have after school as like the last tab, and then you could just have them bring it with them. Oh, sorry. Okay, so transitional cues are huge, especially for students who are on the spectrum. There's usually a hard time with transitions and shifting from one activity to another. So using cues to let them know that things are happening, and they're going to change. So the disappearing red timer, I don't actually think I have a picture of it, but I can get one, just drop it in the chat at some point. But for example, a certain music goes on, and that means, hey, we're going to start getting ready to transition to the next activity. So music, audible timers. This one in this video, she just has a phrase where she says, stop, look, and listen. Just things that are cueing them in so that they know what's coming up next, especially if it's a preferred, like they're doing something preferred and they're having to move to something non-preferred. That's usually where we see the most maladaptive behaviors, because the student is basically not able to tell you, no, I like what I'm doing, I don't want to do what are you telling me to do next. But we do see a lot of that. Oh, okay. Language support. So this one is pretty focused on kids with autism or developmental delay that are lacking language. The key would be whatever they're using during the day, they should be using after school as well. So if it's like the one in the middle is just an iPad that has a case, but what it has on it is a augmentative communication program. So I think the one that's on there is LAMP, where it's looks super complicated, but what it actually is that students learn where the buttons are, and so they never move out of that space even when the screen changes. So they learn, like, if they want food, they're going to one area. If they want a break, they're going to another area. So even if they're not always able to read or understand the pictures or discriminate, they can learn it just by where it is on the board. And it can be just a couple pictures at once, or it could be like a full board for kids that are a little bit more advanced. The one that's all the way on the left, that purple book, that's a PECS book, which is a picture exchange communication. This is for kids that are usually pretty young, and don't have the ability to use something more complicated like the iPad. So what they do is they take off the picture of what they want, they bring it to the person, and they give it to them, and then they get whatever's on that little picture. So in the classrooms, they do a lot of this during snack, for example. So it'll be a picture of a goldfish and a cracker and a juice. And then depending on which picture the student picks off and gives to you, would be what it is that they're requesting. And you could also see way at the bottom, the yellow strip. So some of the more advanced kiddos can actually put together a whole sentence. So I want the green something. I can't see what that last picture is. And then the third one is just like to help kids make choices. So each one of those has a little picture behind it, and then each of those buttons would be programmed to say something different. And so that would just be a way to help them request something. So these are just lots more ideas for visuals. This one is just, and this little guy looks little, so the fact that he has that many choices is actually seems a little overwhelming for me, but maybe it works for him. But you could start with just like a couple of pictures, and they might not have that many choices. So that can also help with transitions if students are resistant to certain things, giving them a choice, even if it's a choice between, hey, you can sit at the table with this person or you can sit at the table with that person. Which choice do you want to make? So if you have pictures of that, that can really help. One idea is setting up either, sort of depending on what you have as far as space, is like a calm down corner or a calm down room. So this one is the teacher has just a box of stuff that goes in the corner of the room, and there's like a beanbag chair. And when they need a break, they need to engage with some sensory things, they just go over and are able to take things out of that box and sort of engage with them however they need to. Another one our teachers use a lot is Go Noodle. So they can be requesting if they're, needing input for moving around. And that can be like the whole group. So not even specific to kids with disabilities. Like the whole group of kids could be doing something together with the Go Noodle. I've also seen in the last couple of years, our teachers have started doing like mindfulness and yoga, which I wouldn't have thought would work as well with our kids, but some of them really, really get into it. So just sort of a whole different variety. I think the first point of contact is probably the parents and the teachers about, seeing what works for the individual kids, because it could be, you had a kid with autism last year and A, B, and C worked. And so this year you have a new one and you're like, okay, I'm going to try the same things, and it doesn't work at all. So just making sure that you're checking in. And quite honestly, it could be one day from like one day to the next with the same kids, like something that worked yesterday may not work today. So just sort of checking in with the teacher, checking in with the family, checking in with the kid if they have the language to be able to do that. And that's actually all of the information that I have to present. So I can just leave it open for questions for everybody. And now I can turn my camera back on, so I will look at you guys instead of this weird up in the corner screen. Although I have to say, the whole time I was like making hand movements and showing you guys all kinds of stuff. But yeah, do you guys have any questions? Come off mute or drop them in the chat. Were there any in there that didn't get answered? No?
No,
Okay.
I think we covered all the questions that came through in the chat. I do want to echo something you said about that first point of communication being parents and schools. Certainly, there are lots of rules and regulations around what level of information can be shared. And so starting with the family, I think, is really important.
Oh, okay.
No, and schools know that, there's no concern about that. But just, I think that after school space can be hard sometimes when you don't on that first day necessarily know the background of all the students that you're serving. And so if you do have questions, just wanted to echo what was shared about, going to their families and talking to the school about what are different processes they might have in place. And, I think that probably that consistency between what's being experienced during the school day and then in an out of school time space is really helpful too. We do have one question in the chat. How often do you work with English language learner students who have these issues, and what is your approach to helping them, extra tutoring and attention, and is that possible with your ESL teachers and DCPS? Thank you. So I think this one is really about how do you serve students who are both English language learners and then also have a disability.
It is something that we are working to improve. There is no great method at the time, so we consult, we try to collaborate, and we are working on helping to bridge that gap of English language learners and disabilities, because it definitely is something that is growing in education at this time, and we just want to. We're just really trying to find the best way to bridge that gap, because our English language learner teachers have a specific caseload, and then disability is different. So services looks different. Some schools have gotten creative, but it is something that DCPS is paying more attention to and trying to build that capacity around what that support can look like.
We have another great question in the chat. What do transitional cues look like for older students, and are those different than what was described?
Yeah, and I apologize. We have these classroom tour PowerPoints that we do, and we have not actually done any for secondary yet because we just have been working with the elementary spaces longer, so we have a lot of resources for them. I would say it sort of depends on the student's developmental level. So if it's an older student who is I hate saying this, but like higher functioning or more able to be included in stuff, usually they're going to want transitional cues that are a little bit more subtle. So it can be as easy as like a simple reminder for them, like tapping them on the shoulder, maybe like an iPhone timer, or even like if they have a watch, you can go over and say, hey, can you set your timer for 5 minutes? That's when we're going to do the transition. So things like that would be a good way to do it.
Any other questions from the group? Feel free to come off mute or drop anything in the chat.
And then I think there's one about a point of contact. I don't know. That's up to you guys. You can reach out to us directly or go through Abigail if you have a specific student that you're working with. If it's a student that's in one of our programs, then what I usually do on my team is connect you with the specialist that supports that school. I think Crystal, I think you guys have done sort of a similar thing, but yeah, either way is okay with me. I don't know, Crystal, what you?
Same. So same. Definitely following the initial recommendation to reaching out to the family as Abigail had responded, and the teacher. And then there have been cases that have been brought, and like how can we problem solve, and with them reaching out to us specifically, especially if we know that that child is in one of our programs. So definitely same thing. If that's reaching out to us is not a problem either, we're happy to consult and give recommendations as well.
And I forgot, I actually have this slide. So here are the programs that we're over, and then also Anna and Natalia, who are other program managers on our team. Anna does the independent learning support, and she also does sensory support for deaf and hard of hearing and vision. And then Natalia, I think you guys probably wouldn't have kiddos that are going from medically fragile classroom to aftercare, just because they're in a classroom where they need like a full-time nurse in the classroom with them. So I think probably those kiddos are going home and not doing aftercare, but um, that would be someone we could reach out to also.
All right, last call for questions. All right, well, with that, I will just say thank you to Megan and Crystal for taking the time to be here today, for sharing all this really helpful information. Oh, one question about adapting for movement challenges. I think they mean maybe potentially physical movement.
Yeah, I think that will depend sort of on what the challenges are. We are definitely seeing kiddos that are more severely impacted than in the past. So, kiddos who are in wheelchairs and need special seating and walking devices and things like that. Um, so it sort of would be really specific to the student that you're working with, and that would be one where, yeah, you might need to loop in family support and things like that.
Great. Thank you. Well, appreciate everybody's time. Like I said in the chat and in the emails, this we did record the session. We'll be making it available to folks to share with colleagues, and I'm going to drop in the chat a link to a quick, very, very quick feedback survey. So you can just share your thoughts on today's session as well as our upcoming sessions and anything that you'd like to see. And most of all, thank you for your continued partnership. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.